Welcome to the course Business Analytics and Text Mining Modeling using Python. So, in previous few lectures we have been discussing data structures in Python language, and specifically we talked about the set objects in previous lecture. So, let us do a recap of what we discussed related to set, and then we will pick up from the point where we stopped in the previous lecture. So, we talked about sets similar to dicts with keys and without values, and unordered collection of unique elements. So, created with the help of curly braces or set function. So, what we will do, we will quickly run through some of these lines of code. So, that we are able to refresh some of the things that we discussed in the previous lecture. So, this is how we can create just a second. So, this is how we can create this set object. So, let us run this. You can see unique elements. So, only 2 3 are part of this. Then again we pass a list of elements, only the unique elements are taken and set object is created. Then we talked about few set operations, for example union of set. So, we talked about union method and OR operator, few more examples that we had gone through, and then we talked about intersection of sets, intersection method and ampersand operator. We gone through about these few more examples, and then we talked about updating a set. So, we also said that these are in place counterparts of union method and OR operator that we talked about. So, let us go through this aspect. Then we did few more examples for the same. We talked about another set operation, adding elements. We talked about removing elements, two methods, specifically remove method and pop, and how they could be different that you can notice from the examples. Here you can see we pass on the actual element that we want to remove using remove method, and in the pop method the arbitrary element is actually removed. So, you can see through the examples also as I am running. Then clearing, if you want to clear a set, then we can use the clear method. So, you can see here, if we try to delete an element from an empty set object, then we will get an error. So, you can see this. Now, we also talked about some other set operation like subset, superset, disjoint set. So, we talked about this also. Then we talked about if we want to check whether the contents of two set objects, whether effectively they are similar or not. So, let us run this. You can see through these examples the part that we discussed. So, I think we stopped at this point. So, let us discuss from here, and so few more things about set objects. So, set elements, they generally have to be immutable objects. So, just like we talked about dict keys, and they are supposed to be immutable objects, and we also said that set objects are all similar to dict with keys without values. So, here also the elements, set elements are supposed to be immutable objects like scalar types, int, float, string or tuples, and when we are saying tuples, the elements which are part of tuple, they are also supposed to be immutable. So, let us understand this through few examples. So, we are creating a set of few elements here. First one is 1, then 2, then 3. These three first the elements are scalar types. Then the fourth element is a list 4, 5, 6. So, because list is mutable, so therefore, we should get an error. So, if I run this and try to create a set object, I will get an error. As you can see in the error, you can clearly notice unhashable type list. So, now few more examples related to this. Now, in the next example, first three elements 1, 2, 3 are scalar types, then I am passing on a tuple. So, tuple is also made of the elements which are immutable scalar types. So, this is okay. So, if I run this, I get the output. Now, next example that I am taking, here I am creating a set. First three elements are again okay. Now, the last element is a tuple. However, first two elements of this tuple, they are okay, but the third element is again I am using a list here. So, again this becomes a mutable object. So, if I try to create this one, again I will get an error. So, you can see in the error unhashable type list. So, in this fashion this will give you an idea again about what can work in a set object and what can't work. So, sometimes this is really useful while we are dealing with certain complex scenarios. Now, we will talk about one more aspect related to some of these data structures, specifically list, set and dict. So, there is a very popular language feature, Python language feature, comprehensions. So, we call them list, set and dict comprehension. We will talk them one by one. However, let us discuss few points about these comprehensions and what they are about. So, these list, set and dict comprehension, they facilitate a single line or expression in place of a loop and loop with if else block. So, certain situation when we are writing code, we will have to use a loop and then if else block, in the sense conditional logic and all that to complete our code. Now, some of those situations where we are using for loop and if else block, that can actually be replaced with a single line expression. If you remember in our previous session we talked about ternary expressions. So, there also the main idea was to use a single line or expression. Here in the when we are dealing with list set and dict comprehensions, there also the idea is quite similar. So, few more things are possible in this, especially from the data analytics context and also in the text mining modeling context. If we use these comprehensions, it becomes possible for us to filter the elements of a collection and then transform the elements which pass through the filter. So, given a certain number of elements, we can apply a filter, select the filtered elements and transform them. So, this process is which we can perform using a for loop and if else logic. So, that we can do there, that we can using these comprehension we can perform using a single line or expression. So, in especially in the data transformation, data processing, cleaning, some of these steps that we are required to perform in data analytics, including data mining modeling and text mining modeling. So, these language features could be really useful. So, let us first start with list comprehension. They are one of the most popular Python language features, and how the list comprehension are actually coded. So, the basic form, you can see the basic form within a list, that means square brackets. First the expression, this expression is about transforming the filtered elements. So, this expression we are using to actually whatever operation that we want to perform on the filtered element. So, first we write our transforming expression, then like for loop we have this for keyword for value in collections. In a sense we are running for loop. So, for value in collection, and for that means for each of the element in a collection and we will run a loop and then filter. So, filter is if condition. So, in a sense when we are talking about loop and if else block where we would like to do filtering and then whatever the filtered output is we would like to apply transform them. The same thing is can be coded in this fashion using a list comprehension. So, if condition is actually filtering. So, we can select few elements from the collection that we have and we can run a loop, select few filter few elements and then transform those elements using the expression that we have. So, let us understand what we discussed with few examples. So, let us say we have this sequence 4 where we have the this is a list of strings and we have these 4 string elements. The first one is Om, then Namah, then Shiva, then chanting, and so you can see the next line is actually where we are using a list comprehension. So, again this is a list comprehension. So, we will start with the square brackets, and within a square brackets the first thing is our expression where we are transforming, where we are going to transform the filtered output. So, let us assume there is going to be some filtered output. So, what we are doing is we are taking that filtered output that is x and then applying this upper method. So, in a sense we are transforming the filtered output. So, whatever filtered string elements that we get, we would like to capitalize the characters that are part of those string. So, this is the transformation. Now, we are running a loop for x in sequence 4. So, for all the elements in this case we have not included the conditional logic part, the if part, which is used to filter the elements. So, that is actually optional. So, this is just to give you that indication. So, if I run this sequence, you can see, and if I run this, all the elements of the list that we had in sequence 4, they we get a new list and a new list of strings, and all the elements, string values, they are now capitalized here. Now, similarly in the next example, if you have a look here, expression is same, transforming expression is same, x dot upper. Then we are running this loop for x in sequence 4. So, for each string element in the list, and then if length of that string element is greater than true. So, all the values that we have, if their length is the number of characters in those strings are greater than 2, then we would like to filter that out and then apply our transforming apply our transformation, this expression, and that means we would like to capitalize all those characters. So, you can see out of the 4 string values that we have in the original string sequence 4, Om Namah Shivaya chanting, Om is the first string element that we have, that is not satisfying the condition. So, it will filter out. So, the filtered output will have Namah Shivaya and chanting. Now, all these 3 string values, they will be capitalized. So, if I run this expression, this line of code, you can see in the output. So, from this you can really understand the kind of scenarios in data analytics context, in the data mining and text mining context, where this could be really useful. Now, let us move on. Now, we will talk about the next comprehension, that is dict comprehension. So, here the basic form, the way we are supposed to code this is within curly braces. First we indicate our key expression and then colon and separate our value part, then we will have value expression, and then value expression, then we will run our loop for value in collection. So, for each element in the collection we will run the loop, and then the filtering part of it, if condition. So, in this fashion we can write. So, let us take an example now. So, for the sequence 4, what we can do is we are using enumerate function here. So, in this example again we are not using the filtering part. So, we are running a loop and we are enumerating the sequence. So, what will happen for each of the string that is part of this sequence, for that we are in a sense trying to create a mapping where we are trying to indicate the index for that particular string element. So, you can see in the expression that is to be used for the transformation, we have v colon I. So, v will store the string part and then I will have the the index here. So, if I run this, I will get this dict object where each of the string, they have their indexes, they have their indices mapped to them in a dict format, key value pair format. So, you can see in the output. Now, next type of comprehension is the set comprehension. So, the form is quite similar to the other two. So, you can see again directly I am using example here. So, this is also within curly braces, and the transformative expression that we have is length of x. So, whatever filtered output that we get, we would like to compute the length of that is those string values, and we are running a loop here for x in sequence 4. So, for each of the string values that we have in this list of strings, we would like to compute the length, and we will get a set of those length values. So, if I run this, you can see 2, 5, 6, 8, the length of those strings have been computed. Now, let us talk about a few more aspects about list comprehension. So, the next one is nested list comprehension. So, just like we can have nested loops, similarly because here also a loop is involved and that is the core component of the comprehension. So, here also we can have nested list comprehension. So, sometimes we require this also. So, here in terms of order of the for expression, this is going to be very similar to what we have when we write our nested loops. So, let us take an example here. So, suppose we want to extract the list of strings with 2 or more A's, that means A character, A letter from a list of strings. So, here you can see the sequence 5 as an example I have defined here. This is a list of which are again list of strings. So, first list element is Om Namah Shivaya and each 3 element are string. The second list is Shiv and Sambho. So, these are 2 strings and 2 elements of the second string. These 2 lists are part of another list. So, let us look at the nested list comprehension that I have written. So, here you can see X for L in sequence 5. So, in sequence 5 that is a list of list. So, that means each element is a list. So, for each of the list we will use this transformative expression, that is nothing but that element itself X, and then the second loop is for X in L. So, within that list each of the string elements that we have. So, the inner loop would be about that, and then we have this filtering component also here. So, here each of the string that we will have will count the number of characters A, and if it is greater than 2, then those strings are to be filtered out, and they would be the output would be presented in the list format, because you can see the outer list comprehension. The transformative expression is that X is there is actually a list. So, if I run this, you can see I get number, because out of this list of lists of strings only the number string is there where 2 characters are there. So, that is our output. To understand this, let us take another example. So, in this example what we are trying to achieve is to convert a list of tuples of integers into a list of integers. So, how that can be performed? So, let us look at the this sequence. So, this sequence is a list of tuples. So, this list has 3 tuples 1 2 3 first tuple, 4 5 6 second tuple, and then 7 8 9 third tuple. So, what we are trying to achieve is we are trying to achieve a list which is just comprising of the scalar types. So, we would like to get rid of the tuple structure that is there. So, again we can achieve this easily with the nested list comprehension. So, you can see first the outer comprehension X for T in sequence. So, sequence 6 is what? List of tuples. So, T means tuple. So, for each tuple in that sequence the transformative expression is X. In nested comprehension that we had is for X in T. So, in in the tuple is made of 3 scalar types here. So, for each of them we would like to present in them in the list format. So, if I run this, you can see in the output we have been able to in essence transform the list of tuples of integer into just a list of integers. So, just using these nested list comprehension, just like nested for loops we could have used otherwise. This can be easily achieved using list comprehension, one single sentence concise way we can achieve this. Now, let us talk about another aspect that is related to list comprehension itself. So, sometimes we might have list comprehension inside a list comprehension. So, this is slightly different from when we talk about nested list comprehension. So, in the sense the transformative expression that we might have, that itself could be a comprehension. So, we need to focus on the syntax differences here. So, for example, if we want to convert a list of tuples of integer to a list of lists of integers. So, you can see here in the first we are running this comprehension for T in sequence 5 sequence 6. So, sequence 6 is list of tuples. So, for each tuple we will run this loop, and for each tuple when we run this loop, and you can see the what is the transformative expression, that is also a list comprehension. So, for each element in the tuple we are just presenting that in the form of list itself. So, if I run this, you can see in the output. So, from list of tuples of integers, we have been able to transform it into a list of lists of integers. So, this was about list comprehension. So, we have covered most of the data structure aspect, tuples, list, dicts and sets, and now the comprehensions as well. Now, we will move to the next important aspect in Python language, that is functions. So, we have been using in our previous lectures, we have been using functions a lot. So, now this time we are slightly more detail we will cover, because some of the aspects related to function that has already been discussed. Now, functions are another type of Python object. So, in this programming language and Python programming language, functions are also defined as just another type of Python objects. So, because of this kind of definition, functions it is easier to code certain situation which involve functions. So, this is a primary and most important mechanisms of code organization and reuse in programming language. So, not just Python programming language, and almost all the programming language, functions play an important role in terms of organizing the code and to be able to reuse the code whenever whenever we expect that certain part of code will be used in a repeated sense. So, that is when we realize it is better to code that as a function rather than having the a standalone code block. So, that will help us in a sense in code organization and reuse reuse of that particular code block further. Now, how the functions are created? So, this we have already understood. So, we use the def keyword, and typically we have more than one dead end statements with the return keywords. So, typically it is like just you can consider a function, or for that matter any any code. There can be many pathways. So, the execution flow, if we talk about execution flow, it can go along if we want to reach from point A to point B, and rather point A, let us say it is there are various pathways. So, the flow of execution can take any of those pathways, and so therefore, there could be requirement of ending that particular code block in different ways. So, we need to use different return keywords. Return keyword is something where we are indicating that the code block that we have in the function that has finished, and we are supposed to return to the parent block. The scope is going to change there. So, multiple return statements might be there, and in case there is no return statement, then by default none is returned automatically. So, multiple code of flow of execution can go in along multiple multiple pathways. So, for each one we might have return statements to end it, and then if not there, then none would be returned. Now, function, as we have discussed before also, they can have positional arguments as well as keyword arguments or named arguments. So, both these kind of arguments could be there, and we talked about that this aspect before as well, that keyword argument must follow the positional arguments if any. So, if there are any positional arguments that are part of a function, they will come first, because they can they are defined by the position. So, therefore, it is important that they come first, and then the keyword arguments, because they can also be identified with the keyword. So, here you can see we have given one example. So, because of these types of arguments that we might have a function can be called in many ways. So, we will see that aspect as well. So, let us look at this function definition. So, we have using keyword def and then the function name which is f, and then in the parentheses we define our arguments here. So, x comma y. So, these are two positional arguments. Then third argument is the keyword argument, that is z, and we are giving a default value to this argument as well. So, another aspect related to keyword argument is that typically when we want to give an a default value to a particular argument, then keyword arguments could be really useful. Then we have our code block within the functional scope. So, if z greater than 1, then return this. So, this is one possible flow of execution. So, if the value of z happens to be greater than 1, then we will execute this statement, return z multiplied x plus y in the parenthesis. So, this is one possibility that we have, and once we reach the return statement, the will come out of the functional scope. There is another possibility, if z is not greater than 1, then we will reach to the else block, and then again we have another return statement there. So, as I said, just in the overall code that we write, or in the function we might have multiple possibilities. So, therefore, especially in the functional we have to explicitly indicate that using the return keywords, or by default none would be returned. So, let us run this, and can be called in many ways as we discussed because of the positional arguments and the keyword arguments. So, you can see first example that we are taking function f, and in the parentheses first argument value we are passing 1, then 2, and then you can see we are using the named argument z is equal to 0.3, the default value is 0.5. So, now this value that we are passing, this is to be used. If I run this, we will get the output. Now, another way of calling, you can see here first argument is 3, then second argument is 4.5. Now, third argument is 1.3. So, I am not using the third argument which is actually a keyword argument as a keyword argument, rather here I am using in a positional sense. So, I am passing on the value here. So, this can also be executed. So, this is another way of calling this function. Then the third one is that I am just passing two arguments 4.3 and 6. So, you can see whenever we have the key arguments, in a sense that argument can also be an optional arguments, because we have given default value. So, in that sense we do not need to pass that argument all the time. So, the mandatory arguments will become the positional arguments, and the keyword arguments will become the in a sense optional arguments, because they will have default value anyways. So, we can call in this fashion also. So, f and in the parenthesis 4.3 and 6, just two arguments. However, remember the function takes 3 arguments. So, if I run this, this will also run fine. Now, the next aspect about the function is the namespaces, the scope and local function. So, some of these aspects are also related to how we how we deal with variables that are to be defined within the functional scope, and how we deal with the variables that we might be accessing the functional scope, but define outside of it. So, some of these aspects we will discuss. So, at this point we would like to stop here, and we will take it up in the next lecture. Thank you.